Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Now we begin with the information. The first vice president of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, informed that the opposition received more than $1.8 billion from the United States Treasury Department alone. During his TV show, Cabello pointed out that not only the U.S. aid financed the Venezuelan extremist opposition, but it also had funding from the Treasury Department in Washington. He also assured that in the presidential election of July 28th, the government of the United States financed the political parties of the extreme right for their destabilization campaigns against the country. In the sense, the political leader ratified his denunciations to the extreme right for receiving financing from the U.S. aid to attempt against the peace of the country.
Vale oro.
This is worth gold with this cover. This is worth gold. Here is the source of financing, who they gave money to, and it is not the United States Agency for International Development. This hurts more to the American citizens because it is the Treasury Department. The proofs are at your disposal. I am going to read some of them. Here you have them. More than $1,800 million delivered.
Más de 1.800 millones de dólares entregados. Claro.
We continue in Venezuela as political parties are preparing for the parliamentary and state elections to be held on April 27th. This is the case of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, which together with its leadership, militants and supporters will define its candidates from the grassroots. Leonardo Urrieta tells us more.
The United Socialist Party of Venezuela installed its Congress to define the strategy with which the bases will elect their candidates for the elections, in conjunction with the people, the communes, and the social movements.
All this is the people. It is participatory democracy, and the expectations are to build solidity, true democracy, not the democracy of the elites. The decisions that will surely strengthen the revolution will strengthen the Venezuelan state.
The PSUV is the largest party in the country and is committed, once again, to upholding principles such as gender equality and promoting a central role for the new generations.
Venezuela has a woman's name, and therefore women must occupy the spaces they deserve because the work, the commitment, the loyalty that we put into all the projects we are entrusted with allows us to emerge victorious.
The protagonist participation of our people, and there the youth is a co-participant of this beautiful dream, of this world that we are about to build.
President Maduro, as the main leader of the PUSV, explained the importance of the participation of young people in politics and the general objectives with which they will work in this new electoral campaign.
No one knows more than anyone else. We are all equal in the brotherhood of a dream of building a beautiful Venezuela, a free Venezuela.
For militants and leaders of the PSUV, the participation of the democratic opposition sectors in this process is a sign of the soundness of the institutions.
There are two types of opposition. There is the loyal opposition and the opposition disloyal to democracy. Here in Venezuela, they are very marked. We have an opposition that has been constituted loyal to the rules of the game that are in our constitution, and we have an opposition that has tried to access power outside the rules of democracy.
Opposition parties that have disassociated themselves from the actions of the extreme right reiterated that they will comply with all the processes for their participation in the next elections.
When the fourth phase of the 93 that have been published by the electoral power is in progress,
nuestra organización política
Today we can say that formally and officially, our political organization is participating in each one of the phases that are included in this electoral chronogram.
277 deputies to the National Assembly will be elected in these elections, in addition to 24 governors. Citizens over 18 years old are called to vote.
En la Cámara de Marcos da Silva, Leonardo Urrieta, teleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
We go now to Colombia as army troops have clashed heavily with the National Liberation Army, the ELN, in the northeastern department of Norte de Santander. The Minister of Defense, Iván Velázquez, has confirmed that the fighting is taking place in the rural area of Lourdes. According to the office, one member of the Juan Fernando Porras Front was neutralized and at least 2 have been captured, reporting also the seizure of arms and ammunition. The operation is being carried out jointly with the Air Force, the National Police and the Attorney General's office and is aimed at taking control of Catatumbo and neutralizing the criminal actions of the guerrilla group, according to the Defense Office. Now we have a short break coming up, but we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. We continue with more information. In Argentina, the far-right government of Javier Milei announced the modification of the gender identity law 3 days after the people protagonized a massive federal march for diversity and against fascism. Precisely, the spokesperson of the presidential office, Manuel Adorni, informed that the government will ban hormone treatment and adaptation for minors younger than 18 years old. As the law currently stands, it is the minor's parents who might make such decision. Adorni did not clarify if this modification will be enforced via decree or with the new law through the Congress. And in Peru, transportation workers went on strike in rejection of the management of the Ministry of Transportation and Communications. The protest, which brings together unions and other social organizations, demand improvement works on the rough access roads to the city. At the same time, the National Transport Workers Alliance ratified the decision to paralyze work in Lima in protest against the murders of dozens of transport workers for refusing to pay quotas to extortionists. In this sense, the president of the organization assured that 20,000 urban service buses will participate in the protest and will march from the popular peripheral neighborhoods to the center of Lima. He indicated that small businessmen from the large textile production and commerce zone of Gamarra will also join the protest. And we go now to Ecuador, as the government has ordered the reinforcement of police control in the run-up to Sunday's presidential elections in this fight against drug trafficking. On Monday, President Daniel Noboa ordered the militarization of the country's ports, with Navy personnel patrolling the access channel to the Gulf of Guayaquil. According to the head of state, the objective is to guarantee national security in the event of any destabilizing event and to prevent the trafficking of arms and drugs during the election process. Noboa also ordered to increase military presence on the borders with Colombia and Peru and to close the border passages between next Saturday and Monday. It is important to note that this is the first time that borders will be closed during elections.
By mandate of the Joint Command of the Armed Forces, we have been ordered to militarize the ports. In compliance with this order, the Ecuadorian Navy, through its Coast Guard Command, has intensified its controls at sea, especially of merchant ships docked in the main ports of Guayaquil.
And we continue in Ecuador, as the president of the National Electoral Council, Diana Atamaint, confirmed the complaints against candidates to the Assembly for the National Democratic Action Movement. According to Atamay, there is a complaint for electoral infringement for use of public funds against candidate Yadira Vallas and another candidate of the movement National Democratic Action for a similar act. Atamay also referred to the campaign of candidate Daniel Noboa amid accusations against the National Electoral Council for not pronouncing on alleged violations, adding that if the infraction were proven, it would even be a criminal case. More than 13.7 million Ecuadorians will go to the polls in a context marked by power struggles and a polarized scenario. Meanwhile, in Guatemala, the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was rejected by protesters who described it as an attack on national sovereignty since, among other measures, the Central American country committed to detain migrants with the objective of reaching the United States. Let's see.
The
visit of the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to Guatemala has been denounced as a new attempt to interfere in the region by the Guatemala chapter of the Anti-Fascist International.
In the first place, we must consider that the mere presence of Marco Rubio in Guatemala is an attack against the sovereignty of the country. I can tell you that once the United States puts its hands on other countries, it is not to help.
Protesters remind Marco Rubio of the dark legacy left by the United States in 1954 when he orchestrated the overthrow of President Jacobo Arbenz, who inherited inequality and injustice in Guatemala.
Let us remember that Guatemala was invaded in 1954 by American imperialism. We know perfectly well what a military invasion of our country is.
Officials from both countries assure that the visit is diplomatic, focused on dealing with migration, the fight against drug trafficking, and other strategic alliances.
We believe in a new migration model that allows us to efficiently and humanely address the phenomenon of migration, promoting solutions to the causes that have forced so many Guatemalans to leave their communities, their families, their country.
The country's president ruled out having discussed the safe third country category. The protesters do not rule out that it could have been part of one of the imperialist impositions.
We reject the fact that Guatemala assumes this commitment as a safe third country, not because we are against our Latin American brothers, but because there are simply no conditions, not even for the Guatemalan population.
The protesters claim to be aware of the historical burden and the current context, which demand respect for national sovereignty and an evolution in policies that are negatively impacting the most disadvantaged.
Santiago Botón, teleSUR, Ciudad de Guatemala.
Now we have a second short break coming up, but we'll be right back, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. We continue now with the Middle East. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, denounces, announced on Wednesday that the country will leave the United Nations Human Rights Council following the steps of the U.S. administration. The minister accused the Human Rights Council of making efforts to demonize the Tel Aviv regime by passing over 100 condemnatory resolutions. The Israeli withdrawal comes amid recent international pressure aimed at holding the Israeli authorities accountable for the genocide in the Gaza Strip.
We see President Trump and the team that he's put together as extraordinary friends.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, the Israeli occupation army continued its aggression against areas and camps in the northern occupied West Bank. The new aggressions affected the towns of Jenin, Tulkarm, and Tubas, with attacks of Palestinian citizens and the destruction of homes and the infrastructure of regions and camps. The Zionist troops carried out detonations in residential blocks in the Jenin camp, as well as the burning of houses and the detention of dozens of Palestinians. Furthermore, the Israeli occupation transformed the city of Tulkarm and its camp into military barracks and forced 75% of the population to move, according to Palestinian media. In total, 30 people were martyred in the attacks. Now we go to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as the number of people killed in clashes in the city of Goma has risen to 2,900, according to the United Nations. The organization has declared that the battle for the key town of Goma, which the M23 and Rwandan troops seized last week, has left at least 2,900 dead, far higher than the previous figure of 900. In this context, Bibian van der Per, deputy head of the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, stated that so far 2,000 bodies have been collected from the streets in recent days. The UN official also said that prices had more than doubled and that decomposing corpses were still being found in certain areas. She added that the freeze of the U.S. aid threatened to hamper the work of humanitarian partners in the region.
Yes, our latest assessment, and these numbers come from the country team who are actually actively helping the M23 collect bodies and give them as decent a burial as they can manage, is that so far 2,000 bodies have been collected from the Goma streets in recent days, and 900 bodies remain in the morgues of the Goma hospitals. We do not think that this is that number would not go up. We expect this number to go up.
And as thousands gathered in New Zealand's north to celebrate the international Maori protest are taking place across the country. On Wednesday, the eve of the holiday, hundreds of Maori protesters staged a silent demonstration by turning their backs on government ministers. The National Day marks the 1840 Treaty of Waitangi between Maori chiefs and colonizing British troops, widely seen as the birth of modern New Zealand. This year's commemorations come at a time of increased tensions as the government pursues policies considered by some to be anti-Maori, including a bill which would reinterpret the Waitangi Treaty. More than 80,000 people were expected to travel to Waitangi, including Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, who was criticized for avoiding the event and attending an event in the South Island. And in Morocco's tourist hub of Marrakesh, a contemporary African art fair has energized the local creative scene. The annual 154 Contemporary African Art Fair has drawn collectors, curators, and art enthusiasts from across the world, showcasing works from 30 galleries spanning 14 countries, both African and European. Named in reference to Africa's 54 countries, the fair was launched in London in 2013, before expanding to New York in 2015 and Marrakesh in 2018. Among the works exhibited were those of the Ethiopian experimental photographer Magder Halisele Terese and Sudanese-Somali ceramist Dina Nursati. Figurative paintings also marked a strong presence with pieces from Nigerian painter Chigozie Obi and Ghanaian artist Ache Taiwa.
For Gallery 38, it's very important to be present at this fair because, first and foremost, it's a fair that puts the spotlight on artists from the African contemporary scene. As it happens, we've been a player from the outset who really wants to promote the African contemporary scene. So, on the one hand, we're completely aligned in terms of our objectives, and on the other hand, our participation in this fair enables us to meet a public that we don't necessarily have access to all year round.
So, it's a platform that is perhaps the first platform that has internationally exhibited artists from the African continent and the African diaspora. So we started in London in 2013, where we launched the first edition of 1 to 54 London, and we continued after we realized that there was a real interest, a real commitment, and interest in contemporary art from Africa and the African diaspora. We thought we had to try and accelerate the inclusion of all these artists in the global world, in the art world in fact.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, and also join us on our social media. My name is Belén de los Santos, and this was From the South.